welcome to the Gotham Outsiders, our Batman Pride Parade all month long. Today we have a very special episode, returning guest and one of our favorite humans in the whole world, Jadzia Axelrod.
Hello.
Hello, Jadzia. We've seen a lot of you this week and I love it.
It's been great. It's been absolutely fabulous.
It has been, never enough. But we are joined by a new guest as well today. We have the fantastic artist of Galaxy, the Prettiest Star, JESS TAYLOR.
Hi. Thank you so much for coming, Jess.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
We were so excited to talk
you.
with Jadzia, and then it was like, oh my gosh, do you think Jess would come on as well? So I'm really glad that worked out.
Me too.
And I am
So happy
TJ,
to
your
be
Chris proclaimed Batman acolyte, getting looked over this Pride Month.
I didn't introduce me either. Make sure that I'm Chris. You're obsessive. I skipped right to who I wanted to talk to. Sorry.
Yeah, we were just so
TJ.
excited. No, you're fine. So let's just jump right into
Let's
this.
jump right in.
So, Jadzia, you've talked about wanting Galaxy to be the gayest book possible. How did you go about doing that? And how did Jess's art add to the book's queerness visually?
All right, I want to say it was not like that was a goal to be the gayest book possible. Like, it's not like I was like, now that DC has given me a contract, this is going to be so gay, gayer than any ever gay that gayed. That was not the plan. But what was the plan was to be very unapologetic about the queerness, very unapologetic about the transness. And so because of that, because we are not couching anything, because we are not hiding behind anything, because every line is painted with a rainbow, then it becomes the gayest book DC has published so far. I'm hopeful that we will not hold that title for long, and that there will be other books that will leave us in the dust as far as gay content. As far as how Jess helped with that, well, Jess is amazing.
Yes.
So just they're just incredible.
Thank you.
And they did so much. Like, I had a little input on starter palette. Like I mentioned that I wanted the Ozma Gap to have the feeling of FLCL, the town there, and I think I sent you a screen cap of the backgrounds, and
Yeah.
and that was it. I did give you some visuals on clothing and certain houses, and then that with the rest of it was all you, and you did an amazing job, not just presenting what I wrote, but also doing it in such a beautiful way. It was also
Thank
so
you.
gay. The fact that you worked the colors of the lesbian flag in Galaxy's homecoming dress was amazing. I didn't even pick it up at first. It was so good. And it wasn't until I saw someone pointing it out online. I was like, oh, of course, Jess planned that. Why wouldn't they? So, and the relationship between the two leads, Kat and Galaxy, is so beautiful in the way that Jess draws them. And they're so in love in that incredibly powerful teenage way. And obviously you don't have to be in a relationship to be queer, but if you are in a relationship, that gives you a lot more options to be visibly queer. And Jess just brought all those visibly queer moments to the surface, again, with no apologies, no caveats, just bringing everything out to the fore. And it's so beautiful. And I just love it. I'm going to say beautiful a million times during this podcast to talk about Jess's art, because I don't know of another word.
1,000% true.
Thank you. Oh my word.
Jess, did you want to like add anything there about bringing that level of visible queerness to the art as you were doing it? Like, what were you thinking?
Yeah, I can say that I was the complete opposite of Jadzia. In the moment that I had the script in my hands, I was like, I need to make this the gayest thing I have ever drawn.
Yes.
And it all just
And thank you for doing that.
You're very welcome. I was very happy to. I had like the entire time that I was doing the work, I had like a list of pride flags up, applicable ones, like can I get the rainbow flag in here? Can I get the trans flag in this scene? Can I get the lesbian flag in this scene? Like it was just sheer joy to be unapologetically bright and colorful and also be able to reflect like the softness that I wish I'd have had in my teenage relationships if I'd have been fully out at the time. Just like the all of the visuals with Galaxy and Cat are like a love letter to myself as a teenager, where it was just like I never let myself have that openly. So the least I can do is make sure that Galaxy and Cat have all of that schmoop. Like it's theirs now.
Yeah. Kind of going off that, I was curious. So the book is dedicated to a younger version of yourself, Jadzia, who needed this story. Can you talk about what it was like for you to create what you wanted to see as a child?
Sure. I do want to clarify that while the dedication specifically is to the girl who needed this book ages ago and never had it. That is to me, but it's also to all the trans women who needed this book and didn't have it, and the ones that we've lost because they didn't have it, the ones that are still around, thankfully, and get to see it now. That's who that goes to, and I'm included in that, but it's not just for me. Also, I love that we're not even talking about what the book is about. We're just launching in, assuming all your listeners have already read it, which is great. I think that's wonderful.
They better have. We've been yelling at them to read it for quite a while.
Yeah, the four of us, both together in some fashions and also independently, have been talking about this book for like 5 years. So
yeah.
That's collectively 20 years of talking about this book.
That's how math works.
Of course, we assume that you all know that Galaxy, the Prettiest Star is my graphic novel I did with Jess, and it is very gay and trans and a beautiful romance and a sweet character portrait of a upcoming superhero with DC Comics. I'm doing a horrible job talking about this book now that I have the
do you want
the
me
opportunity and I'm doing it poorly.
I was like, Jadzia, do you want me to do it again? I've done it
please.
all week.
You did such a good job at ALA last weekend talking about this book, and maybe that's part of it is I'm like, now I know how someone really does it, and I feel bad. So why don't you give the intro to the book and then I will answer your question.
For our listeners, I jumped in and self-appointed myself as part of the publicity team of DC this weekend, which was honestly the highlight. It was so fun.
Not the publicity of DC, the publicity of me.
You well,
like you weren't doing this for the other DC writers who were there. No. You were my personal hype squad, you and TJ both, and you got everyone excited in the signing lines. You were handing out the books to people. It was amazing and beautiful. And I want you to do it at every public appearance I ever have.
I will always do it. And I want you to know your publicity team fully enabled me. They kept handing me books to hand out. So
They loved it.
They were fun. So I loved them too.
They're all great.
Oh, they were. They were amazing. Yeah, so hi listeners. Have you heard about Galaxy the Prettiest Star? Because you need to, if somehow this is your first episode and you haven't heard of it already. Galaxy the Prettiest Star is the queerest book that DC Comics has ever put out so far. And basically it is an amazing story about trans superhero written by a trans woman in the DC Comics universe. It is the story we all need and we all need to get behind, and we need to tell DC that yes, we did want this, and yes, we want more of this. So you should read it, you should review it, you should hashtag it on Twitter and Instagram, you should shout it from rooftops if possible. There you go, Jadzia.
And there's a corgi.
Who has lovely corgi butt.
The most important part.
And it is illustrated by JESS TAYLOR, who is a brilliant non-binary artist.
Yes.
Hi, that's me.
Don't want to lose that. And Ariana Monner, who did the amazing lettering, is
Yes.
bisexual. So we have a wonderful little queer trans enclave creative team. It was an absolute joy to work with that, and that was so great. But to answer your question, yeah, that was the whole point of the book, was to write the book that I didn't have. Because isn't that always the point when you're making something new, is to make the thing that you wanted either when you were younger or even right now. And it's like, this doesn't exist, so I need to make it. And that's whether that's a cheese sandwich or a graphic novel. But this was the book that, when I was growing up, there weren't really good representations of trans people in fiction or queer people in fiction. All of the trans people were either jokes or tragedies. And most of the queer stories were jokes and tragedies. There were some that was presenting queerness as neutral, as it was equal to being straight and no big deal. And I didn't see anything that was really celebratory, except for 70s era David Bowie, and we can talk about that later.
We will, don't worry.
And so this was a chance to like do something and do it and have it be celebratory and have it be positive and have it be the thing that I needed as a kid. I think I might have transitioned earlier if I had had something like this to read, because a lot of those early representations that I encountered of trans people were not like me, and I did not see myself in them. And that kind of put me off transitioning for the longest time, because I was like, well, I see this trans person here in this story. I'm not like that. I must not be trans. I must be something else, or this must just be a weird thing. It's not that I'm trans, even though obviously I am trans, and was back then. And I think it worked in that, like, this is absolutely the book that I wanted then, because I have had people come up to me and talk about how that they see themselves in this book and they've never seen themselves in anything before. And here it is in front of them. And what's wonderful about that is it's not just trans feminine teenagers, which is the subject of the book, but it's people who are adults. It's trans masculine people, it's non-binary people, it's even cis people, which is great, because that was part of the goal, was to have something for them too. They can have a little identification as a treat. And like, people see themselves in this book in a way I did not see myself in so many other representations in the past. And part of that is because those representations of trans people and queer people were not necessarily created by trans people or queer people. They were created by, a lot of the times, cis straight men who were very well-meaning, but were not getting the whole story. They were not getting what it felt to be this person. So a lot of it was very a surface reading, if you will. And one thing that has just really like overflowed my heart, because I've gotten so many messages from people of all different ages and walks of life, and how much they see themselves and how much they love this book. And that, sorry, I got overwhelmed.
It's okay.
It's the problem with talking about this book, is like half of it is like, we made something really cool. And the other half is like, oh my God, people's responses. One of the amazing things of being at ALA last weekend is to have this sharp relief between the straight cis response to the book, which is like, this is a really beautiful, powerful work, and I hope you're very proud. And the queer and trans response to it, which is, I am emotionally compromised.
100%.
No longer pilot the spaceship. Which is how you can tell who is who in the line.
100%.
But yeah, it was really great to do it, and it felt really good. And this is like the easiest thing I've ever written. It all flowed out from start to finish, and it all there were edits to be made, there were compromises to be made, there were changes to be made. That always has to happen in both a commercial and a collaborative medium. But in the end, when I hold this book in my hand, it's exactly what I wanted. I am so proud of it. I'm so proud to have my name on the cover with Jess, who did such an amazing job. And that's such an amazing feeling to hold it in my hands and to see this thing that so desperately needed to exist, not just for me, which it did, but for so many other people. Like my local comic book store sold out of this book in 2 days.
Yeah.
Because so many people wanted it and needed it.
Yeah.
And they did not order just like 2 copies, right? This is my local store. They know I'm here.
Yeah.
They got a bunch and it just went. And so I don't know if this answers your question, but it was like, it's immense. Like the feeling was immense. The feeling continues to be immense. Every time someone comes up to me and says how much they needed the book and how much they saw themselves, I feel it all over again. It's just been incredible. Nothing I've ever written has touched people in the way that this book has, which is amazing when you think about like, this is a superhero story being put out by one of the big 2 publishers of superhero comics, a medium not known for emotional resonance.
Sure.
And yet here we are. And it's just amazing that the book exists to begin with. It almost didn't happen so many times. And like, it's a credit to Michelle Wells and Sarah Miller, who fought for this book over and over again for it to exist, because they recognized not just how important the story was, but like how good it is. Like, I wrote a good book.
You sure
Jess
did.
illustrated a good book. Like, we made a great book together.
Yes.
And
yes,
like
1000%.
they saw this and it was like, this needs to exist and be in people, not just because it's important, but also because it's good.
Yeah.
And that's an amazing feeling to know that
Yeah.
people who had the power used it well and used it for good.
Yeah. Oh, you're gonna make me cry too.
Aw. Yeah, I mean, Jadzia, I told you off the air, I was afraid going in with my friends' books. I'm always like, oh my gosh, what if I don't like it? Like, I love this person, but I'm gonna, this book, and I loved this book. And I think a lot of times we see books being like given a gold star just for existing, and this one though, like, it is good. And I know you're biased because you wrote it, obviously. I'm biased because I love you, but like, as a librarian, the quality of this book, it is good. And
Thank you.
I just needed to tell you that.
Absolutely, 100%.
And now, Jess, your style is so unique. Can you tell us a little bit about like what inspired your art on Galaxy? We hear maybe you were like listening to a podcast while you were working.
Yeah, maybe this one, I don't know, like, oh, it's a long time ago now. I definitely wasn't talking about this before we went live. Yeah, like, I discovered your guys' podcasts through Jadzia and just like doing a little bit of Twitter hackery to have a look at what Jadzia had been doing before Galaxy, before making me cry thoroughly on the first read through of Galaxy. So yeah, you guys can be credited for the layouts for this book, because you were the company I needed to keep going. The layouts, oh gosh, they're the worst part of doing a comic book.
No.
At least they are for me, but once you get to the colors, it's fine. As for what like inspired me on Galaxy, there are so many good influences. So many good influences that like come through from Jadzia's writing quite clearly, like the golden tones of the Wizard of Oz and the very like surreal fantasy leaning towards the colors in all of the Wizard of Oz movies, and the theater shows of like Wicked and stuff like that have always been something that I've adored. But then to see Ozma and all of the other little like Easter eggs that are hidden throughout Galaxy really brought that back for me.
Yes.
Also, like Bowie, you can't sit down and write a book that's titled after a Bowie song that has like however many numerous references, I lose count every time, and not go to every single one of David Bowie's albums and be like, oh, look at this cornucopia of very bright work that Bowie did, especially like back in his earlier career. And that, and I think obviously I did animation before I went into comics, so when I was sitting down to plan Galaxy and how I wanted that to be on the page, I was thinking a lot about how to push the characters in quite an animated way. I felt like this was a story that deserved every inch of emotion to be squeezed out of it and put into the artwork. And my animation background really came in quite handy there.
Yeah, that's so funny because I was gonna chime in and say that it really reminded me of like a television show animation. Like I can clearly picture this on like a Netflix limited series, like that. Your art style just would be perfect for that.
Thank you.
That really came across well.
Yeah, like some of the larger influences obviously from like animation were Carmen Sandiego, Steven Universe,
Wow.
like
I love that.
just bringing those sort of things in. And then I've always been a huge Evendell fan, so if you see a few Sleeping Beauty-esque backgrounds, that's why. I can't leave them behind.
But I love that. That's so fun.
I really wanted the artwork to be as unapologetic as the script was.
It is. You did it.
Thank you.
Yeah, you both brought your A game, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
And also, obviously, Argus is, I would say, the fan favorite character here. How did you come up with the idea behind the corgi with an alien center? And how does Argus's character mirror Galaxy's journey in the book?
I love describing Argus as a corgi with a chewy alien center. That's
Thank
great.
you. I thought that was very clever of myself.
You're very good. Well, I love talking animals, and it's just a thing. Like so many of my stuff has talking animals in it, so it was gonna happen, and a lot of it was like, all right, so how do I get a talking animal into this book, because that's what I want. But also it made sense with the narrative of Galaxy and how she's being watched all the time. And so she would need a constant companion all the time. And to have another person around her all the time didn't quite seem right, because then we wouldn't get that feeling of isolation that Galaxy had. So it had to be an inhuman who is around her all the time. And then naturally it was like, well, it's got to be a dog then. And it's got to be a talking dog who sounds like David Hyde Pierce. And so this idea of this little biological robot dog named Argus. I've named so many characters in the 30 years that I've been writing stories, ever since I was like 10. Naming them Argus, because I always thought that was such the coolest name, and one of those neat monsters in Greek myths that's like so compelling because of how weird they are. And so when I was trying to think of a name for this little corgi who watches everything, Argus just seemed the perfect name. And so now finally I have a published character named Argus, so I'll never use that name again. Which is great because Argus earned it, because he's delightful and I love him. And my one regret with the story is we never get to see anything Argus can do. Like Argus has superpowers too, as a bodyguard protector, and we never see that beyond his little flashlight eyes.
Yes.
Such a good moment.
So like there's much more of Argus than meets the eye, and that's something I love about him, is that he's just fun. And like to make him a corgi just seemed obvious because corgis are adorable, but they're also herding dogs. I have a friend who had a corgi, and when their son was born, the corgi was very like, okay, the pack has increased by a cub. I need to protect it. And it was very protective of the baby, and like not letting people who were not part of the tribe get too close. And it was it was adorable to watch. Like they couldn't have guests over at one point because like the dog will keep you from getting too close to the baby. And I know you're here to see the baby. So we put our corgi down in the basement so you can come and see the baby. Yeah. And so like that behavior is just who corgis are. They're very smart, and they're herding dogs. And so it made sense that this little robot, whose job is to protect Galaxy and also record everything she does for posterity, and also in case something happens, needed to be a corgi.
Do either of you have a favorite Argus panel in the book?
Yeah.
One that comes to mind?
I love the one where he pops out of the doggy door. It's just a little pop.
Yeah.
That one's great.
See, mine is the cake. The cake one is my favorite.
The cake
is
good. My favorite image of Argus, though, is the one Jess put on Twitter of like Galaxy's TikTok or something.
Yeah.
Or just maybe just a cell phone pic of Argus just being cute. And I love that. I love that picture.
I love the disappointed Argus face that he just goes, "You are incorrigible."
My favorite one, I think, is when she throws something at the school and then they turn and look at each other and they're just both really nervous and running away. That moment's so funny.
That was cute.
And the expression on his face is great.
Oh, that was cute. So emotional whiplash moment of the episode. We're going to go from talking about cute corgi to trauma.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
This is how our show goes. So Jess, the way you depict trauma in the art is so heartbreaking and moving. Can you discuss the way Galaxy wears trauma on her face and shoulders at the beginning of the book, and especially kind of the color palette, how it changes from more muted to bursting with color as we go from trauma to joy?
Yeah. When I was first brought in on Galaxy, one of the very earliest conversations that I had with Sarah, our editor, was about color language. Partly because I am a fully painted artist, so everything that I do is just color. So it's incredibly important to me, but also because the imagery behind color palettes is important to me. And we had a conversation where we both came to this big decision that Taylor, before she steps into the joy of who she is, needed to be in a world where everything felt just a little bit closed off. And the easiest way to do that was through a desaturated color palette. Partly because in my own experiences as non-binary, being closeted, it really does feel like you are disconnected from the world. Like everybody else is living a different kind of life and you can't quite see where that joy comes from. And I really wanted to push that with how the art appears at the beginning, in both the colors and in the way that Taylor holds herself. As for the acting, like I said before, my backstory is animation. And body language is obviously a huge part of that. When you're sitting down at school and you're learning how to be an animator, you have to learn how to be an actor. And having the body language wherein Taylor looks as though she's got the entire world resting on her shoulders and can't seem to find the courage to have big motions or very expressive moments. I wanted anything that seemed to be very energetic to almost look accidental, as though Taylor had been holding everything in for so long that it just then had to explode in one little moment, and then the next was reined tightly back in again. It was really important to me to try and get that across visually, especially because it was so clearly written that way through Jadzia's script. Was just Taylor as a character undergoes this massive transformation of self quite early in the book, but most importantly after the acceptance of who she is and the bravery to step forward and into that. Just it's night and day when I was reading through it, and I wanted the joy of stepping into that, of owning herself, to be this big massive moment that would then continue with momentum throughout the book. And the easiest way to get that across for me was to have it be an incredibly dramatic comparison, if you will, like a contrast between the two portions of the book as much as I could get it through.
Yeah. Well, you absolutely did. I mean,
Thank you.
One thing I love that Jess did, and this was not coming from me, I did not direct them to do this, they did this, which was amazing, is way about the middle of the book. So Taylor has transformed to her feminine persona, her true self, a couple times, but is still changing back to interact with her family and her school and all that. And one thing that I loved watching is the way Jess subtly includes more feminine body language than masculine Taylor. And it's just it's so beautiful, but also very subtle. And I just really, really appreciate that and enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for noticing.
Oh, absolutely. It was a really lovely touch. Your answer kind of dovetails into another thing I wanted to highlight, because you talked about feeling this way as a non-binary person. I know I felt this way too as a non-binary person, because one part that really spoke to me was the way that Taylor at the beginning feels disconnected from her body. And we see that specifically in the basketball scene where she says, like, I am just the thing that gets the ball from the floor to the net, which is exactly how I described my body at one point, as the thing that carries my brain from room to room. And so I felt seen and attacked. But can you both talk about like drawing and writing that idea and how you conveyed it in such a powerful way?
Yeah, I think that whether you're non-binary or a more binary transition or genderqueer or something, I think that very much describes the like a very broad gender dysphoria. Like we are disconnected from our bodies. And the problem with being disconnected from your body is you still have to carry it around. And that's weird. It feels really weird. And it feels like you can't escape it because you can't in that way. Like you're gonna have this body. And that you can change how you think about it and you can change physically it, but it's always gonna be there. But early on in dysphoria, certainly I felt this. It felt nice to hear that you also felt that way. And this idea of like, I'm just using this body to do what I have to do, to get through the day, to do this task. I used to injure myself a lot, and not in any serious way, but like, I would frequently notice cuts on my hands or my legs just from interacting clumsily with objects. I once fell off a ladder onto a concrete floor and just got back up and continued doing what I was doing. I was just so in pain that the additional pain that happened from actual physical pain didn't register anymore. And that was definitely my experience. So putting it ironically in a less dramatic fashion than I experienced it on the page, because Taylor doesn't just notice wounds on her body as she goes through life. It's one of those things, like so many of us queer and trans people have these things in our life that we think of as jokes, but are actually really sad, which is like, oh yeah, look, another wound. And then it's reality is I'm just not noticing what's going on because I don't want to notice, because I don't want to think about it, and I don't want to be aware. And that was something that once I especially once I started hormone replacement therapy, but even before then, when it was just a change of mindset about what my body was and could be, it was amazing. It was amazing. Like, I know that like a couple days after I decided to make this decision, and then it just, like, getting into bed felt differently. Like, I was like, I can feel the sheets. Oh, this is nice. In a way that just had never like occurred to me before, and never really registered, because I was so busy blocking out all possible sensory input from my body because it bothered me so much.
Yeah.
I'd say that's definitely like an experience that I've echoed, that people used to make people used to make a lot of jokes about how clumsy I was all the time. And it's almost like you have to step back from yourself in order to be okay moving through the world. And in doing that, you sacrifice really being present in your life most of the time. And getting that across, especially through artwork, is difficult.
But you did it.
You did.
Thank you.
You really did. Yeah.
Thank you. I definitely tried. Like, using, again, as I said, like color and stuff is super important to that sort of message, but also just I wanted to echo that feeling of like, you almost feel like a robot in your own life. And like you said, your body is just, it carries you around, and that's the extent of what it does. And I wanted Taylor to look and feel very automatic at the beginning, like almost as though every action was scripted, or at the very least like unthought about. And obviously that changes quite dramatically after the conversations about who she is and living her truth and stepping into it. But I think there's something that we don't talk about a lot, or at least haven't in my communities and experiences with like other trans people that we've spoken with, which is that even when we've stepped into ourselves, we still carry a bit of that trauma around. And it's always kind of there on the bad days, but it's there on the good days too. And so even when Galaxy's motions become a lot more true and honest, and Taylor is like in and of who she is and living like that, that every so often you might see a panel where it's just a little bit stiff, or it's a little bit uncomfortable, and it takes a very long time to step into that and get used to it. And Taylor is still very early on in her journey in this book.
You both, I'm getting really emotional here too, but you both really captured that. It especially, you know, those two scenes, the basketball scene where she's having that internal monologue, and then later when Kat is doing her makeup for the first time. Both of those really spoke to my experience. Like, I remember being an adult, the first time I ever thought of doing my hair intentionally or my makeup at all. It had just never occurred to me to care about any of that. And I heard actually Jonathan Van Ness, another non-binary person, talking about caring for your body as an act of radical like rebellion. And that was the first time I ever was like, I think I should do this. Like, I actually think I'm letting assholes win if I don't care about my body. And this really brought that back to me.
Yeah, it's funny that you bring up the makeup scene where she's getting all dolled up before the party, because one of the things I've gotten so many messages about has been the freak out right after that, where Taylor sees herself all dolled up and can't handle it.
Yeah.
And so many people have contacted me and been like, this is so true. This is exactly how I felt when I first saw myself, even a little bit.
Yeah.
Like my true self. And then I flipped out, and I know because I did the same thing.
Yeah.
And that scene almost didn't make it into the book. Sarah, who's a brilliant editor, wanted to cut the freak out and have it go right from her seeing herself in the mirror to the party, which is usually how those scenes go. And I told her, I was like, I really would like to keep this scene in. I would like to keep these 2 pages in. And I wrote her a whole essay about why it is important for the queer trans experience. Because for her reasons, like pacing wise, she's right. It like does make more sense pacing wise to go right into the party from that moment. But it feels more true to have, you know, all those years of repression and denial suddenly come flooding back and completely ruin the joy of the moment, because that happens. Yeah, I just want to give that a little inside bit. And I guess, Crow, that I was right. That we should have included it.
1000%. It was important.
I think it's so easy to just like, especially for cis people reading this story or examining this story, to think that it should follow the same steps as, you know, cis high school narratives and the movies that we've sat through and watched our entire lives. But the thing that really did hit me with the first time I read Galaxy, and every single read through afterwards, were those moments that were that little bit extra, where it was like, oh no, yeah, this is what makes this true to me, to us, to like the trans experience in general. And like the makeup scene is an incredibly powerful scene, but the one that made me cry the first time round and really drove home how important Galaxy was as a story to me, as a reader, was the bathroom scene.
Yeah.
Where Taylor sees herself in that mirror for the first time, and just the line of, I didn't know how much it hurt until it stopped.
Yeah.
Like that gets me every time. That's
You make such an important point. And I know, Jadzia, you and I have discussed this, though not on a podcast, as far as I know, the idea that some people are trying to push, like, let's normalize our experiences. But then there's this other discussion of, should we be normalizing our experiences, or should we be queering the world so that our experiences are normal, which are two kind of very different ideas.
I mean, I'm always going to fall down to queering the world.
Me
Like,
too.
that's my default response to any
thirded.
question.
Right. And I thought of that when Jess said that point about, like, people will expect us to, let's make a cis story, they just happen to be queer. And you both said no.
Yeah, like,
Yeah.
I feel, sorry, go ahead.
No. You say your thing, and then
there's always this pressure to conform, no matter where you stand in like the queer universe or the queer spectrum. Like, there is this myth that you have to conform to be palatable to a cis world.
Oh my God, yes.
And I feel like that gets pushed through so much in our stories, to the point where, like, we start to lose a lot of the queerness from narratives in that push to make them normalized. we lose the moments that really resonate with people for the sake of making them palatable to a cis audience. And cis audiences don't need any more stories.
Yes.
Like, they have a ton. Like, can we have some good rep, please? Jadzia out here giving us the good food.
Good soup.
Yeah, and there's this myth, and I talked about this with some librarians this past weekend. There's this myth that if we can just find the right way to present this stuff, like the unoffensive way, the mildest way, then the people who get upset that these books exist won't. That if we can just do that, then it'll be fine. And like, that's not true.
No.
Like, Genderqueer, Maya Kobe's brilliant memoir, is the gentlest, softest exploration of one person's gender journey, not even talking about like a larger experience, but just what Maya went through. And like, that is the most challenged book of the last year, the most banned book of the last year. And like, if that isn't acceptable to people, then nothing will be.
Yeah.
Nothing. And I've dealt with publishers who are not DC, who have hired me to do trans and queer stuff. And I'm like, let's go, I'm ready. And then when they see the script, is like, never mind, this is very trans and queer, and we thought you were going to do something a little less. And it's like, even if I were to do things a little less, even if I were to tamp down all that I am in my
Never
glory,
should,
right?
ever.
It wouldn't matter, right? Like, it's just that, like, the things that makes people upset are that we exist. It's not how we're existing. It's that we're existing at all.
Yeah.
And
yes.
And so that was like, with Galaxy, was to, you know, just show how we exist and to not try to couch it and not try to tone it down. And like, it's, everything is wrapped in metaphor, because comics is a visual medium and it's good to represent that stuff in metaphor, but also, and to also universalize it a bit, and which is great, because that means that trans masked people have seen this, non-binary people have seen themselves in this.
Yeah.
And so that's been great, and we haven't gotten hung up on the exact changes that trans feminine people go through. But it's still, the core of it is still a very queer trans story. And it was very important for me to, with all of this sci-fi rigmarole, to make, in addition to Galaxy being trans in metaphor, to make Galaxy trans in actuality.
Yes.
And that, yes, her, everyone's talking about her turning into an alien, or being an alien all the time and then dropping her human disguise. Everyone's talking about that. But like, the way they talk about it is exactly the way people talk about trans people. And also, she was presenting as a boy, but was in fact a girl all along.
And going off of that, I wanted to bring this up because I think it's something you're getting asked on Twitter. Can you talk about the decision narratively to have a male appearance magically forced on Taylor when she was born a princess? Where does the metaphor end and the trans representation begin, or are they purposefully entwined?
Right, it's all supposed to be simultaneous. Like, it's never, there's not supposed to be like, this is a trans story up until this point, and then it's not. One of the things that's bothered me about other sci-fi metaphor trans stories, beyond the fact that these people, this is written by well-meaning cis people, and that's clear, but a lot of it is like, here is a person, let's just say for the sake of argument, here is a male person, and then they are transformed into a woman, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, everything makes sense now. This is who I am meant to be. And that has always bothered me, because that is not the trans experience. The trans experience is not that you are a person for so long and then suddenly you realize, oh, this is who I'm meant to be. the trans experience is you are always this person, and you have learned how to interact with a world that doesn't want you to be this person. So you have created a new self over who you are, and you have piloted this new self up until you can't. And then you're like, this is who I've always been. That is the trans experience.
Yeah.
And so very purposefully, we start Taylor. She has an identity that is feminine and is forced to abandon that for a masculine identity, because her feminine identity makes her a target. And then at some point she's like, I don't care if it makes me a target anymore. I'm still a target even if I'm hiding. And like, so that was really important. And we don't specifically know how Taylor is assigned at birth. We don't know what her genitals are. And like, that was again on purpose because that doesn't matter.
Mhm.
And also, I have all of this stuff about gender on Ciandy that we didn't get to this book, but that's a whole nother thing. But what is important is that up until 10 years old, Taylor was able to be who she was and to be a feminine person, a feminine child. And then right about 10, right before puberty kicks in, all of a sudden there were new rules about how she had to behave and who she had to be. And then her body changed in a way that she didn't like and felt uncomfortable with, but couldn't stop because the adults in her life thought that was best for her safety. And like, that's the trans experience. And what kind of alien genitals she had when she was born isn't necessary because we have the trans experience there.
Beautifully said.
And one of my favorite lines in the book is, sometimes you have to break something in order to keep from falling to pieces. I felt this and other scenes really captured the rage that queer people can feel due to hiding their true selves, but also touched on the vulnerability of being under so much social pressure to conform. Can you speak to these themes and how you decided to include them?
Oh, well, yeah, I'm angry all the time.
Yeah, same.
That's your
Right?
secret.
Same, backed up.
Yeah,
Like
that's
Hulk.
part of it. Like someone asked me on Twitter, like what power ring of the Green Lantern rings, right? Like which one would Taylor wield? And I was like, oh, it's red. She would absolutely wield the red ring. She is so full of rage and so full of anger. And she doesn't get to express that because we don't get to express it. Certainly not when we're children and when we're teenagers. But even when we're adults, like
It's just something that we're expected to carry.
Right.
And make it palatable.
Yeah. And that was something that I didn't want to gloss over. There's as sweet as this book is, and it is very sweet, and the romance is very soft and nice and wonderful and happy, and it gets a very sweet ending. Like the characters are so angry at the way they have to live because of the society we live in. And like,
sorry.
Yeah,
I was
go
just
ahead.
going to say that was one of the things that struck me, like when I first read through the script, was just I'd never seen a queer narrative before where people were allowed to be angry and were allowed to express that in ways that obviously mattered to them. And like you have several scenes throughout the script that were just this distilled anger that I was like, God, it's so good to see that on a page. It's very freeing to know that it's not just me keeping a lid on all of this like absolute rage all the time. And it very much felt like you just allowed your characters to be people in every aspect that meant. And queer rage is often like seen, especially trans rage, is just it's so unpalatable to like the broader spectrum of people that I've never seen it I've never seen it on screen. I've never seen it on the page. And it really struck me the first time I read through it.
Thank you.
Mm,
Yeah,
well
I think,
said.
and part of that I think is that we don't want to be angry. Like we don't want to have this rage and this anger about things. We want to just focus on the good stuff. And but I feel like the good stuff and the rage go hand in hand. And like to deny one is to deny everything.
100%. So, TJ brought up his favorite line. One of my favorite lines is you wanted me to wear a crown of stars and I can't even keep my hair long. Did I sob? Yes, I sobbed. I sobbed the whole book. So the absolute right, the absolute grief and pain in this line connected to me deeply. And I tried to make this into a question, but I'm just going to put a question mark at the end. Talk about it.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think a lot of that is like the haircut stuff is so I loved all the haircut stuff because it was so silly, but it was also a nice way to underline how little control Taylor has over her own body. Like
Yes.
she can't even keep her hair long. Someone is going to cut it. And that, there's this hope, right? That all parents have for their children, that they are going to wear that crown of stars, that they're going to be beautiful and glorious and royalty in every way that means. And like, that's hard. And it's, I mean, my parents loved me and supported me and like always supported my writing and my stories and like thought I was going to do good things like this book. But at the same time, like I did not feel comfortable coming out to them until my 20s about being queer. And then, I didn't come out to them about being trans until 36. And that was like, I couldn't, even though I knew all this stuff when I was younger, and I couldn't feel comfortable telling them that. So a lot of that is that sort of dual feeling of like, I know you as a parent want everything from me. But also because of who you are, I can't be everything because I'm afraid to be all of myself around you. And that was something that I lived with as a child. And that was, so it was natural that Taylor, who is so much of me, it's funny because we were just talking about the DC Pride special and you mentioned how much Alicia with her wit and her not wanting to take anyone's bullshit is very me and how much of a stretch it must have been to write that.
Yep, because it was.
Which is, and it's funny because I don't think of myself as like Alicia. I think of myself as like Taylor, who is just for the longest time like stuck in her own head and eventually is able to come out and be the glorious space princess that she is. But yeah, all of the things she says are things that I have said, and I've said them to myself as a teenager, or I've said them to myself as an adult.
So David Bowie was a huge influence in this story,
yes.
Which I'm so psyched about. I'm obsessed with Bowie. But can you talk about the importance of music to the story, especially the music of this queer icon?
Right. Well, that's because he's a queer icon, right? Like that was when you're writing a young adult book, the first thing you do is like, well, what was I into as a teenager? What was important to me? And one of the things that was important to me was someone gave me a cassette tape of Ziggy Stardust and Spiders from Mars and said, listen to this. And I was like, okay, sure. Because my idea of David Bowie was someone who was, popular in the 80s or whatever, but like, who cares? I didn't have a context for him. And then I listened to his 70s stuff and it was just amazing because not only are they amazing songs just on their own, but also there was that beautiful celebratory queerness and some genderqueer stuff as well that I'd never heard before. and I had never experienced before. That was the first exposure to like queerness can be celebratory. Queerness can be magical and beautiful. So when writing this, I like, well, David Bowie's gonna have to be a part of it, not just because of how much it meant to me as a kid, but also because of those themes are right there. And I considered briefly using a more modern artist like Janelle Monáe, who's doing similar things. But I really like the timelessness aspect of having David Bowie, because like those songs are like 50 years old now. Like that's half a century. And for Taylor to be into them creates this sort of, one of the things that annoys me, I'll just say it. One of the things that annoys me when you're reading books written by adults about teenagers is you will have the teenagers be really into the music of their parents for reasons. Like they will always be at this justification of like, this is why I love 80s songs, because my dad was really into him or whatever, or I just discovered this incredible band from the 90s. And it's like, okay, I get that you don't know any popular music. That's fine. We'll gloss over that and move on, but it always annoys me. But because David Bowie was far removed when I was a teenager, it didn't feel like that to have Taylor discover this 50-year-old song and be like, this speaks to me. Yeah. Because David Bowie has been speaking to people in that way for half a century. So it all fit together.
Absolutely.
So we were really interested in the contrast with how Superman is discussed in this book. It reminded us a bit of Superman Smashes the Klan and the discussion of Superman as a model minority who under respectability politics is the kind of immigrant alien people can accept. Can you speak to the way you use this to highlight Galaxy's unique struggles?
I mean, yeah, just like that.
Thank you.
Nailed it, TJ.
Just something we wanted to bring up.
Very good. Yeah, and it was a combination of two things. One, definitely like if you are an alien in the DC universe, everyone is going to hold up Superman as the one that makes good, right? Like you should be more like this guy, who looks not incoincidentally as a white man. Be more like him, you guys. But also it was like, when you're a trans feminine person and you are in the closet and you are trying to be more masculine, often you will take a masculine person and be like, I'm going to base myself off of them now. And that's how to be a man. And I've seen this the other way with trans masculine people when they are still in the closet and be like, I'm going to be a woman. I'm basing who a woman is after this woman. Like it's not uncommon. So because everything in superhero comics is blown up and huge, obviously, if you're going to pick a masculine role model, it has to be the biggest, brightest, most muscular, powerful masculine role model possible. Superman. And that also underlies how impossible that role model is. Like, you can't be Superman. Superman isn't even Superman all the time. Superman has to stop being Superman to be Clark Kent sometimes. Like, that's exhausting to have to do that. And so to have that be Taylor's not only this is what a good alien is role model, but also this is what a good man is role model, shows the lie of it and shows how impossible that whole thing is. Which I'm assuming is also what happens in Superman versus the Klan. I'm in the middle of it. I haven't finished it.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah.
It's so good so far. Like, I'm loving it.
Yes. I was writing that question before you told me you hadn't read it. And I was like, well, I hope it makes sense. Jess, can you talk a little bit about exploring Galaxy's internal life through those moments when the art becomes more surreal and we see her kind of imagining like causing destruction or yelling, and then it's not really what happens?
Yeah, like
Beyond Division.
Yeah, Sound Division. Early on in the script, Jadzia kind of given a note of every time Taylor is angry, please make the art different.
Hmm.
And I was like, okay, different. And I was like, well, how do I feel when I'm angry? And internalizing it. And it was just like, it's almost as though you're living in an inverted world. And I took that quite literally and turned it into the colors. And then when it came to exploring Taylor's powers later on, and the way that Taylor picks up on like electrical currents and fields and exactly like how things look down to molecular structure and circuitry and veins and nervous systems. And I was like, okay, I can visually marry these two things. And that really made it cohesive to me that when Taylor was angry, it was because she was trapped. And then I could carry that forward into, and now Taylor is herself. We can have her powers be represented as this. Like that anger was tapping into who she truly is, and is rightful anger because she can't speak out about it. She doesn't feel like she has the voice to say that. Why not make that part of her powers? Why not have her internal world be reflected in how Cyandi see the world through their powers? And I've tried very hard to kind of keep those visuals not exactly the same, but like united in their color palettes and united in like the shapes that you find in those panels.
Well, excellent job.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love how you did that. I love that you have this amazing art style to begin with, but also because you have this amazing art style, you can take these really cool non-realistic leaps into a more abstract and stylized direction, and it just looks so beautiful and not necessarily jarring. Like it all blends together, even though it's very different than what happened before because of the stuff that surrounds it. It just amazing.
Thank you. Fantasia scarred me for life.
Now,
thank you.
Some readers may have expected the vein to show up in this book, but that's something for another day.
Yes.
Can you talk about the decision to not have them appear in this story?
Yeah. As much as I wanted to see Jess draw the vein, and I still do.
Oh, same. I want to draw the vein.
They can't show up in this story because once the veins show up, then the story changes, and it's not about how Taylor discovers who she is. It's then about how does Taylor fight the vein, which is a great story and one I hope we get to tell, but not the one we wanted to tell here. And on top of that, Taylor's spoilers for the book, I'm sure everyone's read it who's listening.
Yes.
But Taylor's big moment is her recognizing that like it does not matter if the vein are here or not. I'm going to be who I am. And that is ruined by the vein then showing up, because then everyone who told her that she had to hide herself to be safe isn't proven right. It's like, yeah, here they are, I told you. And so then Taylor's undermined in her own journey, and that can't happen. So we can't have the vein, but the vein are there in the same way that Superman is there, right? Like she knows they're watching her. She knows they know she exists. She knows they're looking for her. And so to have them there as this nice little catch-all metaphor for intolerance would, I think, be lessened if they actually showed up, as much as we want to see them. There was an early draft of this that did not have the vein proper, but had an agent of the vein, a Vanguard, show up. And there was a whole knockdown, drag out fight at the end with Taylor using her new powers against, it was Lobo in that original draft. It was decided that we would not use any of the established DC characters in this for a lot of reasons, not the least of which it kind of undermines the fact that this whole story is supposed to take place in an isolated area. But in that draft, we did have Lobo coming in and like, who was hired by the vein to kill Taylor. And then she stops him and everyone in town is impressed and she's a superhero now, et cetera, et cetera.
Mhm.
A much more traditional ending. And I credit Michelle Wells for reading that and being like, this is good, but this is also not how the story ends. And you know that. And I was like, I do know that. All right.
Yeah.
And so I scrapped that for a much better ending, I think, where it doesn't matter whether the Vane are there or not. It doesn't matter if Taylor gets the approval of Ozma Gap. It doesn't matter if anyone thinks she should be there or doesn't. What matters is that she is there. She is there as who she is, and she's there with her girlfriend whom she loves. And like, that's what matters. And that's the important thing. And that's why the book ends with them way up in the sky, kissing, because that's what we were going for the entire journey. And to have anything other than that be the ending would be disingenuous.
Agreed.
Because what I really want people, the little queer babies who read this, what I want them to take away is that you may be excluded from other things because of the horrible world we live in, but that doesn't matter. You don't need them as much as they think you do. And like, that's what I wanted. And again, that decision would be undermined by including the Vane, by including Lobo. All of this stuff that's really important for the story to have. If we had done something more traditional, it would have been gone. Now that we've done this story, we can have the Vane show up and we can talk about them as a force to be reckoned with. And what do you do when there seems to be a very powerful force that is destroying everything you know and love, which is something that we are experiencing currently in our life. I was just thinking this morning, is like, if I had written this story now instead of 5 years ago, it might have been a little different. And but I'm glad I didn't, because I think this story still needed to be told, and I'm glad I got the chance to tell it along with Jess, who did an amazing job.
Yeah, it's definitely so wonderful to see a story where you can be just as powerful and just as impactful without the big fight scene at the end, and that was definitely this. So Kat's mom plays an emotionally huge part of the story. The challenge of finding queer elders and learning from them is one you and I've discussed before. I was wondering if you could speak to the importance of including this in this story.
Yeah, Kat's mom is just great.
Yeah.
Again, that was a character that was almost cut.
Oh, I'm so glad you didn't.
Yeah, I'm so glad I didn't too. Cool. Well, all right. My impulse is to put in too many characters because I love all of them and I just kind of keep adding them. So like Taylor had a larger family, and then we also had Kat and her mom. And then it was like, you need to cut down these characters. Let's get rid of one of the extra characters in Taylor's family, and let's get rid of Kat's mom. And I was like, no, we can't get rid of Kat's mom. It's so important that Kat's mom is there. We will get rid of more of Taylor's family because I need Kat's mom in there, because it was a combination of two things. One is I wanted to show that not all adults in this book were bad.
Yes.
And that was important. And that to also show that like Kat is loved. And like, as sad and as angry as Kat is, she's not going it alone. She has a family. She has a mother who cares and loves her for who she is and what she is. And that is important, because I didn't want it to feel like a cold, unfeeling, isolated existence for everyone. And like, so we had to have like this warm motherly presence in the book. And the fact that it is nearby, but also not Taylor's, like it's just out of reach, kind of undermines the opposite of undermining. Overmining.
Highlights?
Highlight, thank you.
Got you.
Overmining.
I like overmining though.
Yeah, me too.
Kind of highlights how this is missing in her life. Like she and also that femininity is missing in her life too. Like she is raised by a father figure. She has an older brother. Like the only other girl in the house is her little sister, who she calls Goblin.
Yeah.
Like this idea of like, here is not just a feminine presence, but a woman, and a warm motherly woman, like, and how magical that is to feel that way, is not something I wanted to get rid of. I wanted to keep her so bad. And I'm so glad we did. And I love the way that Jess drew her as this just like beautiful, large presence, like this force of nature, of warmth and loving. And it's just great. Yeah, I love her mom.
I just wanted her to look like she gave real good hugs.
And she does.
Oh,
Like, just when I was designing her, I just sat down and I was like, what is the kind of person that would raise someone as emotionally intelligent and as comfortable with herself as Kat is? I was like, that is someone who is accepting, someone who is soft, someone who is no nonsense when she needs to be, but is ultimately okay to offer a little guidance where it's needed. And I was like, how do I express that in a character design? And it took a few iterations to get exactly what I wanted. But I feel like it was like the unique challenge of mixing competent and soft and motherly all together without making it a stereotype. And I hope I succeeded on that. But mainly, I just wanted her to look like she gave
You
great
did.
hugs.
You succeeded. You succeeded on everything you did. So just accept that and be
Oh
embarrassed.
gosh.
But
Okay. All right.
you did. You did. Okay.
Uh-huh.
Jadzia, you brought up Taylor's family, so we wanted to bring up Sally's role in the book, specifically how she highlights the way kids are so able to accept what adults struggle with. And what were you trying to do with that? And then contrasting that with Buck's whole situation too.
Right. Well, like, again, you nailed it.
Thank you.
You guys keep answering the question for me, which is wonderful.
You just made us think, Jadzia. You made us think.
Well, thank you. Yeah, like as Sally takes it all in stride, and that she's the one who's more so accepting, and that is something I've seen of kids. Like all of this behavior that we have, that comes to this distrust and this kind of dislike of queer and trans people is learned, right? Like that's all learned.
Yes.
And so when you have someone young enough who hasn't learned these things, then they don't do anything about it. And also Sally is just happy to have an older sister, which is wonderful. And then you have people like Buck, who is absolutely based on friends I had in high school when I was closeted, and who would say homophobic things and talk about not liking gay people, not realizing that I was sitting right there. And like, at one point I remember like a kid going off on a rant and being like, I just hate queer people. I hate gay people. I hate them. And I was like, and I know him when I see him, was essentially a thing. And I was like, are you sure? And he's like, oh yeah, definitely. Not realizing that here I was, the exact example of everything he disliked. And like, there is that question of like, how do you go from someone like Sally who doesn't care to someone like Buck who cares too much, and has such hate for something that doesn't affect him at all. And there was a thought in earlier drafts to like have a reconciliation between Buck and Taylor, and that their friendship is restored. And I was really against that. I didn't want that. It felt wrong. It felt disingenuous. Like,
Yeah.
sometimes when you come out, people are mad at you. That they're mad at you for being queer. They're mad at you for being trans. They're mad at you for being in the closet and not saying something earlier. And then that friendship never recovers. And I'm not saying that Taylor and Buck's friendship may never recover, but I didn't want it to recover so quickly.
Yeah.
And that was really important.
Yeah. I thought Buck to me felt like a real person. And I think if they had, fixed that bond so quickly, it would have felt less real to me. And I wanted to say too, like, obviously it's so easy to hate Buck because of his hatefulness, but you imbued him with like a sadness too that he was going through in the whole ordeal. And obviously, like, I don't support his angle, but I couldn't hate him because of that. And I thought it was really well done on your part.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I wanted it to come from a real place. Like, I wanted everybody's actions to come from a real place. And that meant that, like, we had to delve into their points of view. And so we see that, like, Buck feels more than anything embarrassed that he didn't realize what was going on.
Yeah.
Carl is such a big dick, but he's a big dick because he feels like his life isn't worth anything.
Yeah.
And has been told it's not worth anything and has been shown it's not worth anything. And the only way that he can feel like it's worth anything is to get into fights. And like that's, and that was really important. I mean, like, how would real people react to these superhero ideas?
Yeah.
What is the human cost of living in a superhero universe is always something I'm interested in. And like, so to delve into these points of view that are kind of ugly still was interesting to me. And so I'm glad that it worked.
Yeah.
Definitely did.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I know when I came out as non-binary, there were people who really couldn't get over the fact that I was the person that they'd always known, but now I was more me. And I lost a lot of friends while doing it because they couldn't readjust their worldview, or there was that sense of, like you said, betrayal in the friendship that I'd been, and obviously this wasn't the case, but that I'd been hiding things or lying to them. And like, some people just don't get over that. It's just something that they can never come to terms with. And I personally really like to see that reflected in Buck. I suppose without it being completely villainized. Like, obviously Buck has some internal stuff to work through. Please go to therapy, Buck.
Yes. We all ship Buck in therapy.
Yep. Buck in therapy. Oh boy.
Oh boy.
I feel like Carl could use some of that too.
Oh yeah. Oh,
Carl needs a lot of therapy.
I really loved Carl in the stories. I'm glad he got the redemption that Buck didn't, because there was a lot going on for poor Carl.
Carl has a great moment if we get a sequel.
I'm excited.
Me too.
So, I would jarringly switch directions on us again in a happy way, swerving the car back into queer joy. Jess, can you tell us about the clothing montage? Because I could talk about it forever and I just want to hear your thoughts.
The clothing montage was something that Jadzia had obviously scripted, and during that scripting process had provided a lot of reference that I absolutely adored and was wonderful in so many ways. And it felt like sitting down and just watching every makeover montage from every teenage movie that has ever had a makeover montage. I was sitting there like, this is just the Princess Diaries and I love it. But there was literally a dress from every era. And it was so great to kind of lean into that, because I guess because when you're trying to figure out like what your style is and what your look is, you go through so many different fads, so many different aspects. You try a little bit of everything and 90% of it just doesn't feel right. And it was nice to see that reflected in such a fun way, and as though like there can be a lot of stigma against trying things out and having them not work or having them not flatter you, and that's a huge deal, especially in our communities. But having like a fun little let's wear as many dresses as possible and find what works scene that also harkened back to old movies from like 90s and the 80s and the early 2000s, and had that pinnacle of like teenage experience wrapped up in it, it was wonderful to draw, and it was honestly a pleasure to do it. I had a lot of fun with those pages.
They were a joy to witness as well.
Kat's reactions were like one of my favorite things to draw on that page as well.
So cute.
Also, we had a lot of exposition we had to get through in that scene. So it's like, what better way than to do it with a clothing montage? So you can have something to look at while Taylor's painstakingly explaining how her powers work.
Yes, please. All exposition must be accompanied by clothing montage from now on.
I can do that.
Okay, good.
So where does Galaxy go from here? How can people support it in efforts to get a sequel? Because I know I need one.
Oh, yes.
We all need a sequel.
Yeah. Yes.
For real. And here's the thing, like, I want a sequel. Jess wants a sequel. Sarah wants a sequel. Ariana wants a sequel. Everybody wants a sequel who's involved on this book. And all that needs to happen is that it's financially viable. And like, unfortunately, working with a large press like DC means that, yes, we can get the books into so many hands and so many stores that wouldn't have if Jess and I were just self-publishing a webcomic. But it also means that a sequel is dependent on sales. I will say, anecdotally, from what I've heard from people, sales are pretty good. I don't know what the actual numbers are or what DC is seeing. I just know what retailers have told me. And by retailers, I mean my friends who work in retailer stores, not even
right.
that. So like, I think it's possible in a way that I didn't think it was possible like before the book came out 2 months ago. Like if you had said, are you going to get a sequel? I'm like, probably not. It's a big gay book, but it was fun to do this. But like, maybe we will get one, which would be great. And the best thing.
Sorry.
Yeah, the best thing people can do is just talk about it and encourage people to buy it. Encourage libraries to get it stocked. Libraries buy a lot of books. So if a library buys even one copy, that's amazing. If they buy multiple copies, that's amazing. I know the local library system has like the book Galaxy's checked out and there's multiple holds. Like there's a desire for people to read this book and that's great. But talk to your local bookstore about carrying it. Talk to friends about how great what the book is. Like spread the word of mouth. Everyone has already been doing that. I want to add, like the explosion of support for this book that happened when it came out is unexpected and just totally filled my heart. Like I thought this book would have its audience eventually. I didn't know that eventually was day of release. Like it's just been amazing. And hopefully that will continue and that a sequel will happen, which would be wonderful. I know I'm chomping at the bit to tell more of these stories, these characters. I know not exactly what happens, but broad strokes of what happens in future books. I know Jess really wants to tell those stories and do more stuff because we've talked about
designs.
it. They have designs, people.
They have designs.
Like we haven't even seen Taylor in her superhero outfit. So like that alone is worth the price of admission. We haven't seen what Argus can do. We haven't seen the vein. We haven't seen her finally meet Superman.
I have a design of Argus in a top hat that if I don't get to put in a sequel, I will be very upset.
As will we all.
Yeah. For real.
Oh my God. So review it on Amazon, review it on Goodreads, talk about it on Twitter and Instagram, hashtag it. I think the hashtag I'm seeing is hashtag Galaxy the Prettiest Star. It's like the whole name, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's a phone called Galaxy, so we couldn't just use that.
That's true. I guess that's fair.
And then there's a soccer team in Washington, D.C. called the Galaxy.
The Galaxies.
So we couldn't use Galaxy DC
Fair.
either. So we were stuck with the whole word.
That is okay. So do
I'm
all
a
of
writer, not a
that.
marketer.
Do all of that. Also, yeah, request it to your library. All library systems have a request, usually a request form on the website. So go do that. Also, some of them have them up on Hoopla, so you can read Galaxy in e-version. And for people who don't know, every time you download it, that's one of the times they've paid for. So if you download it and read it, and other people do that, they'll have to buy more downloads. So it still helps in this way. Yes,
and if you want to be sneaky about it, like if there is a copy at the library, check it out and then just return it the next day, even if you've already bought a copy. Put a hold on it if it's already checked out, and then when it says your hold is ready, just remove the hold and be like, I'm not going to pick it up. But like the act of putting a hold on it counts.
Yes, absolutely. There's all kinds of ways. So I know, get out there.
Like even if you check it out and then just put it right back in the box,
it counts.
that counts. And keeping it in circulation at libraries, I think, is very important, because there's a lot of people who need this book who can't afford it.
Absolutely.
And like, I know growing up, libraries was my main source of media.
Yeah.
And like, I'm so glad that it is in libraries and that it is being checked out. And like, that's
huge.
Makes me feel really good.
And that is a place where a lot of queer kids who aren't able to take media like that home can secretly read between the stacks, you know? So yes, get it in libraries. So have you had any interactions with readers that really stand out to you? Maybe cute moments, things that have made you cry? I mean, other than obviously the best moment, which was meeting the hosts of Gotham Outsiders at ALA.
Yes, that was the best. Nothing will top that. Another ALA experience, which was wonderful, was that some people hadn't read the book. They're these two non-binary people, delightful individuals. They hadn't read the book, and they were like, "Oh, this looks interesting. I'll take a copy," and that was great. The next day, because they had apparently read it that night, stopped me on the floor and was like, "Oh my god, that book was so good. Look, here's something I wrote. Here, do you want to take it?" Oh, like, it was amazing, because it had affected them so much in like just a short period of time. To see the transformation in their behavior, I didn't recognize them the second day, because the first time they were like cool and standoffish and like whatever, and then the next one they were like so open, as if we had been friends forever. And that was amazing. But the thing that I keep coming back to is I got a message from a mother who has a trans daughter, and the daughter takes the book to school with her every day and had in her backpack as like this emotional armor, because things are not great at school. And like, it just is there as like this talisman to remind her of how wonderful and beautiful she is, despite what other people may think or how they might act. And that's what I hoped this book would be. And I'm so glad it is. And like, I've heard similar stories, and that just keeps like, so many people have also talked to me about how it cured them of their trans imposter syndrome, how they no longer feel that they are trans enough because they have read this book and then see themselves reflected so completely that it's like, I must be trans if this is what being trans is, which is the opposite experience I got reading other people's books about trans characters. And so to have that be what people take away is just so wonderful and perfect. And like, again, I wanted everyone to like this. I wanted to write a book that I wanted to see. I did not realize how many other people needed to see it as well. Yeah. And that has been just so humbling and so amazing. And it's one of those things that's like, we talk about the joy and the negative too. It's like, it makes me so happy, but also I am so angry that here we are. This year starts with the 2, and this book hasn't happened already. Like I had to make it. Jess and I had to make it now in 2022, and it wasn't around. The version of this was not around earlier. It's just a crime.
I agree.
But I'm glad we got the opportunity to do it, and I'm glad that it happened, and I'm glad that it's helping people now, which is so wonderful.
Well, how about you, Jess? Have you had interactions with fans that have really stood out to you?
There's one in particular that really stands out to me. I went down to London MCM, which is one of the bigger comic shows in the country, and I had this girl come up to me, and she'd been by the table a couple of times with parents. And then the second time that she came round, she'd hidden her parents somewhere, and she was like, I don't have the book because I've been reading my friend's copy, but thank you for making this so that I didn't have to grow up without it.
Oh.
And I about cried.
Yeah.
But that's the one that's kind of just been sticking with me. There were so many people who came by that table that weekend to just say how much the book had meant to them and how much it meant to see something like this actually on the shelves and being unapologetic and just out there. But that one in particular just makes my heart ache.
Yeah. I know it was such a beautiful experience being at ALA with you, Jadzia, and just talking to people who were excitedly waiting in line to meet you. And they were all just saying things like, you know, this book, I'm going to give it to my kid when I get home because she is trans, and I'm, you know, want to bond with her over this and have her be able to see a hero like her. And it just kept happening just over and over again. And it was so lovely. This book is so important. Okay, so as our final question, I wanted to ask something fun. And as we are a Batman podcast, I have to ask, how do you think Galaxy would react to meeting the various members of the Bat family? Who's she bonding with? Who is she rivals with? And who is she taking to sing David Bowie at karaoke?
This is a good question.
It's
Thank
a very
you.
good question.
It's my favorite question on the list, not gonna lie.
Well, all right, easy one. I would love to see her bond with Alicia, because those are the 2 that I write. So obviously I'm on a team up. I would love to see Alicia be like an elder queer to Galaxy's baby queer.
So cute.
I know, right? That'd be really nice. But
I didn't know how much I needed that till this moment.
I know, right?
I don't know how to work it out though, because like if anything, Galaxy's like in the Superman family and then the Bat family, but like I would love that.
Those are adjacent families, to be fair.
If I can figure out a way to make it happen, I will make it happen, because maybe that will be my story in the 2023 Pride Impact.
Don't tease me this way, Jadzia.
But that would be great.
Incredible.
Because I love those 2. I could see her really bonding with Cass.
Yes,
I think they have a similar so as weird as this sounds, a similar history and a similar difficulty with their own bodies. And I feel like the dysphoria aspect of Cass and her relationship with her body and her relationship with other people's bodies is never something that's been explored properly, and would love to see that.
Agreed. I think the only place I've seen it explored at all is in Wayne Family Adventures.
Yeah.
Like everything good.
So I would love to see them like bond over that, and obviously the various ways that their father figures have damaged them. That would be really nice. Yeah. I strangely enough don't see her getting along with Barbara for some reason. I don't know why. I guess it just doesn't click with me.
Mhm.
I could see
I feel like they would clash a lot.
Yeah.
I could see that.
And I don't know why. I can't articulate it, but it just like this gut feeling.
Mhm.
And then I think she'd hang out, she'd have fun with Tim. They would totally go to Pride together. That would be fun.
I could see her pushing him out of his comfort zone of queerness. Be like,
Yeah.
come on, let your freak flag fly a little bit, Tim.
Yeah, and I could see her getting along with Batman because Batman loves a foundling. So like,
yes, and all his queer children.
Yeah, I could see him putting a cape over her shoulders, kind of thing. You know, that sort of. I could see that.
Yes.
Damien, I'm not seeing it.
Yes, I could. Yes, because he has trouble making friends.
I'd love to see Damien and Susie though.
That would be so cute.
That would be fun, and have him try to teach her how to use dangerous bladed weapons. That would be so good.
But you know that the first like 5 pages would just be them staring at each other from across the room grumpily. Like,
yeah, it'd be great. I would also love to see Carl and Jason like sit down and have a convo.
Oh, they would get each other. So
please,
deeply.
I need it.
That'd be fun. I think she'd get along with Dick because Dick gets along with everyone, so that's not really saying anything.
That's true. I gotta say, I feel like Jason would take her to the karaoke to sing David Bowie. I can't explain it, but I think that's the case.
I feel like a black horse in this race would be Bruce.
Yeah?
Yeah, I feel like Bruce would also take to karaoke.
Oh!
Yeah.
I would love that.
Bruce would buy out the karaoke bar so they would have it to themselves.
That's perfect. So everyone can go.
Uh-huh.
I feel like Alfred too. He definitely has that in him after his theater days.
For sure.
Well, this was perfect. I love it. So as we're wrapping up, announcement for the listeners, Jadzia's amazing publicity team was kind enough to gift Gotham Outsiders with 4 copies of Galaxy the Prettiest Star, which we are going to give away. So here is how you get one. You can, first of all, like and retweet our post about Galaxy the Prettiest Star and this giveaway so that more people know that this book exists and get their hands on it. Then you are going to comment. You can get 1 entry into it for commenting what you think Galaxy's fandom, fans should be called. You get a 2nd entry if you can come up with a ship name for Galaxy and Cat. So go forth and be creative. And Jadzia will pick the winners.
So impress me.
Yes, so impress Jadzia. You have your mission should you choose to accept it, listeners. Now, as we wrap up, where can our listeners find you both on social media, and what other projects do you have for them to look out for?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at PlanetX. And there's also my website, JadziaAxelrod.com. If you want to see some other things I've done, definitely pick up this year's DC Pride issue, which has my Alicia Yo and Batgirl story, which is a lot of fun. And there's other things that I can't talk about, but someday.
Exciting.
You can find me just by Googling JESS TAYLOR Comics. I come up with my Twitter and my my website come up. And I've also got an Instagram under JESS TAYLOR Arts. So those are definitely there.
Do you have other projects to promote?
I do. I've done a couple of covers that I think that people should check out. The one that's available at the moment is for issue 4 of the new Doctor Who line.
Ooh.
The Fugitive Doctor. Yeah. Which I'm super excited about. Oh, dang, I can't talk about the other one yet.
Oh, stay tuned on Twitter to hear about it.
Yeah.
Exciting.
I've only just finished it and I'm like, they're not going to let me talk about that just yet. No matter how relevant it might be to this podcast.
Oh, the tease.
Such a tease.
That was a good tease. That was good. Oh, well, thank you both for coming. This was absolutely a dream.
Thank you so much, both of you, for coming on. This has been fantastic.
Thank you so much for having
us.
us.
Yeah.
Oh, you
It's
made me cry
always a
like 12
delight.
times.
Always a delight to talk with you guys.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that's why I've been on your show so much, because
Yeah.
I love it.
Good, because you're going to be on it many more times, I'm certain. Thank you for listening to the Gotham Outsiders. You can find me, Chris, on Twitter at The Myth of Psyche, where I talk about feminism, psychology, and Batman, of course. But you can also find me on my new show at Thirsty on Tune, over on the Talking Comics feed, where Bronwyn and I review webtoons and drink wine, and also review romance novels. You can also find me writing reviews at talkingcomics.com, and I am now accepting consulting clients. So if you need someone to do sensitivity reading or consult on psychology or queer identity, I'm your person. You can also find my co-host TJ
At Troyfin2 on Twitter, where I talk about books, gay things, gay books, and all sorts of things, including Batman pretty often, way more than I used to. And I recently became an official librarian, so you can find all sorts of book reviews that I post just for fun, a lot of advanced reviews of books that haven't come out yet. So if you're looking for a nice gay read, please hit me up. You could also find me talking on other podcasts just here and there if you search my name on any podcast service provider that you listen to.
And you can find us both talking about Batman all the time at the Gotham Outsiders. So join us next time. Same bat time, same bat place.